Hello, everyone. Welcome to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, the J.R. Stewart.
And I'm your co-host, Tommy Duncan, otherwise known as TD3. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Wednesday, April the 12th, 2023. Jimmy, if it's Wednesday night.
It's definitely Black Men Speak time. And so let's give a big shout out to Liquid for providing our theme music. And if you haven't already, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. And if you're here watching tonight, invite a guest to come with you. The topics that we discuss on this show, Tom, and the information that we share is something that is worthy of discussion after the show with friends and family. So I always invite someone to come along and watch with you, and then you guys can talk about the topics afterwards on your own. So with that being said, Tom, let's get started.
Yes, sir.
Let's do what we do.
We have a couple of news briefs that we're going to share, just updates on some things we've been tracking over the last week since our prior show. And then we have our main course, and it is going to be a great subject. Very much looking forward to bringing back one of our great friends and colleagues to discuss the impact that mass incarceration has had on Black America and the Black family. But prior to that, Jimmy, let's kind of talk about a couple of news briefs before we get to the meat and potatoes of our show. I know we were talking about this a couple of days ago, Jimmy, and the recent trip that Vice President Kamala Harris made to Africa.
Well, Tom, I'm very disappointed. Not in the trip itself. I'm disappointed in the fact that this administration, which 89% of Black folks voted for, continues to disappoint. They pledged billions of dollars to the continent of Africa, and I've gone through the latest budget proposal, and there is no request in their budget proposal to ask Congress for the money. And so when you go to Africa, when other major leaders go to Africa, the general expectation is there's so much need in Africa. It's not that they're necessarily sitting there with their hands out, but they do expect that when you come, that you will be coming offering projects, money to help their government or to improve their quality of life. But when you come with just rhetoric and no money, that sends a bad message. And it's something that was definitely noticeable. And let me just say this, Tom. I saw part of the vice president's speech while she was in Ghana, and she pretty much pissed off the people of Ghana, the government, the speaker of their house, advocating, because we know that Ghana has very strict laws against homosexuality. Correct. And so I'm not sure, Tom, that this trip she could have made this trip and spoke up for strengthening economic ties between Black people in Africa and Black people in America. She could have talked about a host of things. Why go to a country that has very strict laws and culture against homosexuality and lecture them about homosexuality? So let's get into we have two videos to show. And so let's get into the first one, and then we'll play the second one.
Okay.
Speakers calling out Vice President Kamala Harris after she visited Ghana, and she mentioned LGBTQ rights, and she was questioning Ghana, and the speaker actually criticized her and called her remarks undemocratic. He also said, "What is democracy? That someone should have to dictate to me what is good and what is bad. Unheard of, because we have decided to devalue ourselves and go begging." He also addressed the president of Ghana, and he said, "This is a word to the president. There is no way he can intervene. Wait until we pass it. That is where you come in." The speaker did not only address Kamala Harris, he addressed President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, and he doesn't seem impressed by the United States Vice President Kamala Harris. He's actually a bit annoyed from what he said, and the reason why he's annoyed is because as a vice president of another nation, when you're visiting a country, you have to respect their laws. You have to abide by the rules. you're on their land. But you know, Kamala Harris said what she wanted to say, regardless of what is accepted or what is not accepted in that country. So the speaker is upset by that, and that is why he said what he said about Kamala Harris. The people are not very happy with how certain diplomats or leaders or ministers will come to the continent and expect us to behave the same way, to say, yes, sir, what should we do? Yes, ma'am. And, you know, things are changing.
Okay, interesting.
So Tom, apologize for some of the sound quality. I forgot to mute my mic when I was doing the dubbing of the recording.
And I
But
did hear
still, I think
I did hear some of the pushback that she got, and you know, I don't know if that is just the narrative that's being pushed out in terms of this dialogue that she had. I'm hoping that wasn't the first thing on her list. Clearly, I wasn't there, but you know,
okay.
there were a lot of things that I think the U.S. could bring in terms of how they can help support the 54 African countries. I know she only went to 3 of them on this trip, Jimmy. But yeah, she did get quite a bit of pushback on this one. I think that the U.S. is a little bit behind China and some other countries that have been making investments in Africa. And I'm pretty sure they weren't appreciative of being preached to about LGBTQ support in their country.
Well, Tom, since you brought up China, that's a good segue into the next video because this person sort of mentions China and their African relationship with China.
Okay.
Let's watch it.
As part of her African tour, and when I tell you that the lady, Her Excellency, came empty-handed, armed with political rhetoric and unrealistic expectations of what Africa should be and the kind of relationship that it will have in America, you might think I'm lying, but that's exactly what happened. Throughout her tour, she sounded like she's at a political rally trying to convince people to buy into an ideology or an agenda. Remember, this trip was meant to neutralize or sort of match up the influence that China has in Africa. The only difference is China comes with money, goodies, projects, and China does not try to impose its values and what it thinks is right on Africans.
Okay, that video is a little choppy, but the main point, Tom, is that she's making is that China doesn't impose their culture on Africa, and when they come with money and they come with projects. Now, of course, we know that this is just China's way to get an inroad in to exploit Africa, because the money that they dump on you and the projects they provide for you, they expect to be paid back, which will probably never happen. So you'll always be indebted to them. But still, when our vice president go and she's not coming with anything, no projects, no money, and this is not like they have an unreasonable expectation, Tom. Just deliver on what you promised that you would deliver on. You pledged billions of dollars to Africa. Even on this trip, she pledged another $100 million to Africa. What does that mean when you're pledging and not delivering? It really just means that your actions speak louder than your words, and you have no intention whatsoever of supporting the continent of Africa.
Well, that remains to be seen, Jimmy. I can't disagree with you definitely in principle. Again, I would agree with you that nobody is going to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in your country without it benefiting them in a pretty significant way. So I would agree with you in terms of China's agenda. I know that they are not investing hundreds of billions of dollars for Africans. They're doing that for Chinese, so Chinese interests, so to speak. It's interesting. I'm pretty sure that the Biden administration sending Kamala Harris would be a warm and friendly face, but you have the right agenda. And the reality of it is, if they're going to come over there, they need to come over there with what they consider to be a partnership strategy, which means that they need to come on there with a true economic agenda. But with that being said, Jimmy, we will continue to monitor this, and this is why we as citizens who have representatives, not just at our local, but our state and our national legislatures, need to make sure that our voices are heard in terms of what we feel needs to happen. Not just there, but is here as well. But of course, that is another story. And why don't we do this before we jump in?
Hold your reps accountable.
Exactly. We want to welcome Dr. Zia Wallace for joining our show. Thank you very much. Dr. Zia, she has been on our show multiple times, and she has a couple of comments that I'd like to kind of share. National leaders visit foreign soil where people are economically and systematically oppressed, that is exploitive, especially when no assistance is being provided. Leadership should never, ever promise and under-deliver. People are tired of that song and dance. Right on to your sister. All right, and we also want to welcome Brother Asar Al-Kabilan, who is a constant supporter of Black Men Speak. We want to thank you there as well. Jimmy, let's get to the Ohio State.
Ohio State, so that's some good news for a change. So let's play the clip, Tom, and then we'll pick it up on the backside of the video.
Sounds good.
Get a victory in court today. A jury finding both of them not guilty. They were accused of rape and kidnapping.
Well, tonight they're sharing the justice they say they waited 3 years for. 10 TV's Kevin Landers is live outside the Franklin County Courthouse tonight with their story. Kevin?
Well, good evening. Both men could have faced 3 decades in prison if convicted of kidnapping and rape. Tonight, they're talking about how a jury reinforced what they already knew, the truth. Amir Reep and Jocelyn Wint have maintained their innocence from the start, despite accusations from a woman who said both raped and kidnapped her in 2020. During their trial, cell phone video was played where the accuser was heard saying the sex was consensual.
I don't think that mattered. I think what mattered was the testimony. They heard from his accuser, and they heard from Amir, and they heard from Jocelyn. And jurors are fantastic at discerning credibility, and they did that here.
3 years later, a jury found both men not guilty of the crimes.
It's a great feeling. Kind of hard to put into words, but great would be a goal.
The fact that they embraced me after the fact, showing me how much they cared, and you know, they had sympathy for me, and they understood that the predicament that I was in was a bad one.
The accuser, who asked her testimony not be filmed, testified Reep forced her to have sex, and she had no opportunity to say no. She also said Reep pinned her in place while Wint forced oral sex on her. Wint's attorney questioned why prosecutors took the case to trial.
And given her incredible inconsistencies with what she told the police, what she told OSU, what she told Judge Skeens, I couldn't even believe that they indicted this matter.
Both players say waiting 3 years to hear the words not guilty wasn't easy. And they say now that the case is over, they plan to continue their football careers and their education.
So, Tom, let's just say that both of these brothers were suspended off the football team once these charges were leveled.
The day after.
In addition to that, yes. And then in addition to that, all too many young men find themselves in situations like this, and there's always pressure to just go ahead and plead guilty to get rid of the case. Just you'll be sentenced to a year or two, you get out, then you get on with your life, because if you're found guilty at trial, this goes to trial and you're found guilty, you can be looking at 30 or 40 years in the penitentiary. And so sometimes when faced with that and the belief that you're not going to get a fair trial, especially when 2 black men are accused of kidnapping and raping a white woman, then there may be some added pressure to just plead guilty. So I'm glad that these two actually decided to fight for their innocence and went to court and actually won.
Jimmy, it is unfortunate that we continue to see these stories. I remember the story a few years back with the young man who was playing football at Missouri. And, you know, I mean, we go back to some of the earliest, highest profile stories of what they say a black male targeting a Caucasian woman. Of course, we go back last century, the most famous case in the United States, Emmett Till. And, you know, This is a very public case. I'm pretty sure that there are a lot more cases out there.
Oh, a lot more time that we don't hear about.
Exactly. And unfortunately for our men, it is guilty until proven innocent as opposed to the opposite. And it's, I am glad that they were acquitted, but their football career, if not off track in a significant way, may be completely gone. They now have an opportunity to complete their education, hopefully make a productive life. But Jimmy, this is, it's a good thing in terms of the outcome, but very sad in terms of the how and why that this happens.
Right. And Tom, I would suggest that if you're in this situation, you do what you think is best to deal with the situation. But if at all possible, fight for your innocence. If you're innocent, fight for it. And I know it's risky, but we need more of our young men to stand up and fight for justice, as opposed to just taking the path of least resistance and taking a plea deal just to move on with their life. So
Exactly.
I'm very happy and excited for these young men, and I hope they're inspiration to other young men. So Tom, we're going to finish out our news segment with another story, another university story.
Yes.
And I think this was good. Texas Southern University, one of our schools, just won the national championship for cheerleading. Tom,
Outstanding.
could you imagine that? Cheerleading. And so we want to congratulate, give them a shout out. So let's play this news segment real quick, and then we'll discuss it on the back end of the video.
Sounds great.
The cheerleaders of Texas Southern University are now national champions.
Giving us something to cheer about, and they are the first HBCU to ever claim a national cheer title. Zach Tautari has more with the champs on their special win.
Well, in their first year in the National Cheerleading Association National Championship, TSU didn't just win it all, they made history. Under the lights of competition,
leaving a legacy on top of leaving with the national title.
The Texas Southern University cheer team shines the brightest.
We told that story as we performed that we are here to do what we came to do.
And now they've got the hardware.
Blood, sweat, and tears went into that trophy.
And the title of national champions to prove it.
NCAA title is big for any cheerleader. Like that's what you dream of.
Last Friday night, that dream became a reality when TSU won the National Cheerleading Association National Championship.
The first thing that popped into my mind was they did it. They did it.
But the team didn't just win. They made history, becoming the first sport in TSU history to be national champs and the first historically black college or university to win a national championship in cheer, a feat Captain Haley Walker says is bigger than the title itself.
Like I've told my teammates, I'm like, we didn't just do this for us. Like, this is for all of the HBCUs, every HBCU around the world, because at the end of the day, we don't get put in a spot like this too often.
But what can't be overshadowed is the special group that Coach Chantrice Como saw before the year even started.
The message was basically to get it done. I knew that this was the year and this was the team that deserved to go and was going to get the job done.
She was right. The team, including All-American mascot Jacob Bay, bought in.
We all did it together. We all came in together and we won together, so it was amazing.
And in a sport that's as competitive as they come, team member Croy Carter says the 26-person team embraced the challenge.
We're showing guys, everybody, that every day this is something we care about, this is something that we're passionate about, and this is a real sport.
And now,
that is outstanding, Jimmy.
All right, so those are young cheerleaders. Yes.
Outstanding.
So I didn't even know that that was something that HBCUs were competing in. I've watched a few of those competitions many years ago, especially when the one that came here to Dallas in the 1990s. But yeah, I never saw any black schools participating at those levels. But I guess things are changing, Tom.
And congratulations to Texas Southern University and their cheerleading team for winning the NCAA championship, Jimmy. And we are going to show at the end of tonight another film, another video on that. But Jimmy, let's get to our main topic for this evening. We'd like to now introduce our special guest for this evening, Mr. Antong G. Lucky. Mr. Lucky is the president and CEO of Urban Specialists, a national nonprofit working to equip, empower, and educate change makers to become the solution to their own communities through mentoring, educational and entrepreneurial endeavors. At an early age, Mr. Lucky was embroiled in a life of crime that ultimately landed him in prison. Antong denounced his gang affiliation and subsequently began working to unite the rival gangs. He quickly rose to become one of the most respected and sought after mentors in prison. Upon release, Antong met Mr. Omar Jawar, and he has spent the last 22 years working to end violence in communities and build sustainable communities. Antong has spent the last 5 years working to end violence in urban communities by training across the country. Most recently, Mr. Lucky trains police officers on effective community engagement strategies. He is a sought-after speaker on issues of eradicating violence, reentry, criminal justice reform, and bridging the gap between law enforcement and the community. So, ladies and gentlemen, we would now like everyone to welcome Mr. Antong Lucky, my brother. Welcome.
All right.
Hey, brother, how you feeling, man?
Outstanding, man, and glad to have you here. We appreciate you making time.
Oh, no problem, man. I'm always honored to come on this show with you brothers and just get a bunch of I get a bunch of information from y'all. So I come on this show and I get my information.
Good deal. Good. We appreciate it, man. So tell us a little bit. We heard a little bit about your background, and of course, a couple of years ago, when Reverend Omar, is a lot of people affectionately called him, went to visit with our ancestors, man, and you came in and started taking the helm. So talk to us and give us, or our audience, some insight and a view as what is happening now and how things have evolved as you got more intimately involved on the front end and being the face of urban specialists.
Man, Tommy, that's a mouthful right there. It's been a blessing being able to continue to work that Bishop Omar and I started 23 years ago. I was coming out of prison, and it was at the height of the gang stuff. I was a former gang leader. I started one of the first blood gangs here in Dallas, something that I'm not proud of. And so I end up in prison. When I released from prison, Brother Omar was in my neighborhood doing the work, right? He was doing this work of trying to change the trajectory of young people, right? And I simultaneously was in prison. I had made a 360, 180 in prison. I changed my life in prison and began to teach in prison. And I developed this passion to go back. Because one thing I realized while in prison was that it was a lot of similarities with the brothers in there. And then it was we all was in this predicament that we were away from our families, in this system that's designed to break us, I wanted to change that, because I was seeing young brothers coming in, and it was the first time that I got an opportunity to look at what was happening, how I was a part of the problem, and what was happening to our community and our family. So I began to read in prison. I educated myself in prison, read over probably 1,500 books while incarcerated, and then got out with this passion to change the trajectory of young people. I didn't want young people to make the choice that I made, because I was an A honor roll student, talented and gifted student, but my neighborhood said survivor. I was born in the hood, Fraser Courts, East Dallas, rough neighborhood, and so me being smart, I learned at an early age wasn't respected. It was about survival. You had to be tough, you had to be mean, and there wasn't any role models or positive Black men in my community. They probably was, but they efforts didn't reach kids like me who was really in the middle of the hood. The median income in my neighborhood was $15,000, right? And so you can imagine that. And so I wanted to get out and change it. I wanted to get out and be an example, the embodiment that you could rise above those circumstances, et cetera, et cetera. And so I met Bishop Omar, and we began to work. We did the first gang peace treaty in Dallas. And then we had 300 gang members sign a peace treaty. And then for the next 23 years, our point of view has been ending violence in urban communities. So that's the work we've been doing for the last 23 years. Bishop passed in March of 2021, and I became the president But the good thing about it, coming to answer your question, was this: for 21 years, I rode shotgun with Bishop Omar. That was my mentor, one of the most smartest individuals I know in the space, that cared about people, that embodied all of the principles of an activist who is working to change communities. I've never seen anyone do it like he done it, right? And so, but we worked hand in hand, talked every day for 21 years. And so we, in essence, built this organization together, because no decision he made without me. And we talked about it every single day. So when he passed, unfortunately, me stepping up into that driver's seat, of which I didn't, was pretty much easy in terms of the organization, right? In terms of understanding the vision, understanding the mission of where we were going. That was pretty easy. I think the challenge was for me was my team, who had watched me passenger seat, being able to accept my leadership, et cetera, et cetera. So that's was the challenge. But as far as the work, man, the work is up and going.
I can imagine having to fill those shoes.
Oh yeah.
And someone who, you know, as a brother, as a man to man, someone that you love.
Yeah.
His going to be with the ancestors hit everyone.
Yes.
So hard. My cousin, my first cousin, used to talk to me about Reverend Omar all the time. Tony Craig.
Yeah.
And so, man, you having to step into those shoes and running like you have, great deal of respect, man, props. But let's talk about this, getting to the nuts and bolts.
Okay.
We live in a country that is steeped in a culture of violence.
Right.
We hear every day about gun violence in schools, unfortunately, in churches, unfortunately, in grammar schools, unfortunately, in grocery stores in Buffalo. Our culture is a culture of violence. You have programs and strategies that you have used. You talked about it earlier, working with gangs, finding truths. But it seems like the dynamic of this country is that it revels in that violence.
Yes.
How do you focus on neutralizing and fighting that in our communities? Because it seems like we have this tendency as a culture, mass media, glamorizes violence. It seems to embrace it, especially when it comes to the destruction of our communities. Not other folks' communities, but our communities in particular. Talk to that a little bit. And you've been on both sides of the track.
Right. I think your depiction of this culture, insatiable appetite for violence is spot on. You spot on that, right? I think it's a myriad of factors that drive this, right? And I'm no expert to say which factor it is, but it's a myriad of factors that we all know, and our community suffer it the most, right? These factors of why we are seeing violence, et cetera, right? One thing that back in the 80s and the war on drugs did, it targeted Black men. It was a way to target Black men and remove them from communities, right? We all know that. There's data to show that the war on drugs did that, right? Along with that, our neighborhood, we have data that indicates that our neighborhoods were stripped of resources, our after school programs, all the programming, the schools, public schools, et cetera, et cetera. We got data to show that. Our neighborhoods were redlined by the banks. We got data to show that. And so as a result of that, that criminal element was heightened, right, in our communities, because people had to fend and et cetera, et cetera. And what it did, it destroyed a lot of families, right? Took a lot of families and just literally, we know that, right? So I agree to all that, because I understand that emphatically and understand how that happened, right? So for us, right, as it relates to violence, we said, knowing that, what can we do? These conversations me and Omar used to have. What can we do to combat that? And so what we realized right, when we started looking at violence, not looking at the causes the myriad causes, because there's a lot of factors. We said, what can we do as it relates to our neighborhoods, right? And one thing that we found, right, was that those black men ages 24 to 35 who had been targeted during the war on drugs, who were removed from families, they had influence even from prison. They had influence on the young people who were out committing violence. They were, in essence, the fathers and the uncles of the young people who were out doing a lot of the violence, because they didn't have that male bull elephant wisdom. So our young people growing up in these communities stripped of resources, single parent household, very, very, very with a lot of resentment, right? Because they wasn't getting the love. This is something we just used to talk about and study. They weren't getting the love, so these young people in essence became the super predators and all that stuff. These names that they gave them, right? That the government gave them. So we said, knowing all this information, Omar and I was among the first that I know who began saying that black men from the ages of 24 to 35 is the solution to what's going on in our community. And that was a different conversation, right?
Unpack that.
Because we said we believe that those men who had proximity to communities could control, had the ability to be the thermostat. They can control what was going on in the neighborhood. And remember, the young people were looking up to their older cousins and brothers because those were the only role models, those were the only models that they had of men in their community. So when I take myself, for instance, I was just explaining, the guys who were the gangbangers and the drug dealers in most urban communities, those were, regardless of how you look at it, to a young person coming out their house and that's all they see, those were the ones who we emulated and wanted to be like. Because it wasn't the big boys, the brothers and sisters, and all those organizations weren't in the hood. You know, they didn't mess with those kids because those kids was the hard to reach kids. We were the hard to reach kids. So who was our role model? Our role models were the gangbangers, the pimps, the drug dealers, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we realized, Omar and I realized, that those individuals had direct influence on the young people. And that if we could get those individuals and begin to educate them and train them on how to use their influence on those young people, then we can begin to change the tide of violence in our neighborhood without really asking the government or the white folks or whoever else about our neighborhood. We are in essence taking control of our neighborhoods ourselves.
Let me ask you this. Before I ask you this next question, I'd like to welcome Ms. Armanda Brown for joining the chat line, Ms. Audrey K for joining the chat line, and Brother Frederick B. Roberts, Esquire, for joining us as well. Thank you all. Of course, feel free to chat a question or a comment that you have it on the chat line. Of course, the call-in number is to your lower left-hand side. Getting to the point, what type of education, what types of tools, what type of discipline, when you talk about these 24 to 35-year-olds, that you are basically grooming them to be that layer of protection, that layer of education, that layer of stability to the young cats who are coming up? Because Jimmy and I have talked about this several times. They're targeting our kids, third and fourth graders. We're talking about 8, 9 years old,
right?
Building a pipeline,
right? And you talking about kids who are growing up in households where the black man is missing for whatever reason, right? Whether it's prison, whether it's probation, whether it's estranged relationship with the baby mother. You're talking about households, and they're using the statistics can only work, and the projections can only work when we're talking about prison, school to prison pipeline. If a positive black man is not in the household, right? When you look at the numbers of a lot of our communities and a lot of our households where they're not the presence of a strong black man, then these are the kids that we're talking about, right? These are the kids that they're building the prison systems over. These are the kids that's gonna have the number of referrals. These are the kids that's gonna become the hard to reach kids, right? And so we understood that, right? And so we said, man, what if we could We can't negotiate the baby mama and the baby daddy getting back together. That ain't our skill set. But what we can do is create this kind of pipeline of mentors who we call local change makers, local leaders who, and tell me the difference is this. Let me go back to this. So we don't miss this part. Me and Omar was saying back in 2000 that black men from age 25, 24 to 35 are the leaders and they are the solution. That was a different concept. So I just paused right there. That was totally different. And most of these brothers that we were talking about brothers who was coming out of prison, brothers who was in neighborhoods who had influence, brothers who didn't fit the bill, not just in white America, they didn't fit the bill in black America. But we were saying these individuals are the solution. And that was a far-fetched, that was hard for most people to digest, right? But we were saying that based on the fact that they carried the credibility and the influence to reach the hard to reach kids, because we understood that 20% of the kids cause 80% of the problems, right? So the 20% of the young people have 80% of the students following, right? So we know that. We knew that kids, that 20%, they control the climate. Those are the kids who all other kids follow. So we said, what if we created a mentor who can target them, who can begin to target them, because we knew the dynamics. We knew that they 9 times out of 10 came out of the house where the mother's working, no father, no supervision. Nobody is attending to that kid to say, what's going on with you? That kid is actually being raised by their mobile device and TV and whatever else, right? So we said, how can we target that? But we have to target that with a type of mentor that have that lived experience that can say, hey, I've walked this path, I've crossed this path, let me help navigate you through this rugged terrain. Because I have mothers who call me and say, Mr. Lucky, and I'm gonna go back to what I was saying. I have my son is a part of the Bigs, and no disrespect to the Bigs program, Big Brother, Little Sister, but those mentors can't relate to my kid. I'm talking about the kids, the hard to reach kids, right, in the neighborhood. They say they don't relate. Can you help us find a mentor, someone who can relate to the struggles of that my kid? And so that opened up a niche for us to develop these brothers and teach these brothers and sisters that, look, you may be marginalized, you've been written off by society, you got felony records, you got this, but what if I can show you that you have the influence and you have a market value? What if I can show you that if you operate in your right mind, that you can go into schools, help communities, get these young people where they need to be? And so we begin to champion this idea that these young men who society looks at as write-offs or marginalized or the problem, saying they are the solution. I never forget, we was at the White House and this white lady said to Omar, it's a joke. It's funny. She said, Mr. Jawa, are you proposing to me that felons work with kids? Because some of our guys and girls were felons. And I remember Omar, without hesitating, said, with all due respect, it was probably a felon that made the kid. And everybody fell out laughing, but it's power in what he just said, right? It's power in what he had said to that lady. Understanding, because look, as I said at the top of this, we understand that our community have been targeted, and our men have been marginalized with the felonies and the records, et cetera, right? But that don't take them out the game. They have an advantage if we can show them where they influence lie. They have an advantage in turning around our community. So we've been training individuals under this program we got called OGU, and these brothers and sisters, some of them have felonies, some of them just people out the neighborhood, showing them that they have a responsibility to go back and don't believe the hype of what the media say about our little brothers and sisters are monsters or super predators, or they don't want this type of guidance. So look, don't believe that if you push past that and begin to have relationships with these young people and begin to show you that you love them and that you care about them, that you can then begin to change the trajectory of their life. And we've been seeing that work.
Let me ask you this. There are a couple of questions on the chat line that I'd like to have you to maybe respond to. One, Ms. Celia Reese, welcome to the show. What age is it that they start to influence these kids? That's coming from Miss Celia. And then good brother, Ephraim Zamil, the poet master. Have you considered taking your program to every urban city in the country? So there's question one.
Yeah.
What age do they start influencing kids? And number two, from brother Ephraim, have you considered taking this program to all of the major urban cities in the country?
Yes to the latter question, and then yes, of course, we started doing that. We have some chapters in other cities who are adopting the model. In terms of age, we normally deal with kids around the age of 10, 11, because if you look at all the data, right when they get out of sixth grade, seventh grade is when everything go left. Seventh grade is when everything went left for me. So seventh grade is that age where you have to have somebody there that's impressionable enough on them to guide them through the terrain, because the seventh grade is when they, sixth and seventh grade is when they start to venture out, because that's the age they start having a little autonomy. They get exposed to a lot of stuff, and that's the most critical age to have positive male lived mentors who can begin to walk and so we have some efforts as young as third and fourth grade as well. I don't want to discount that, but we really go in right before they go to junior high school.
So to summarize, obviously enabling and providing the right tools to younger brothers, somewhere in the mid-20s to mid-30s, giving them the right tools. No, they're not in the house every day with that kid like their father would be, but they are accessible. They have the right tools in order to change the psychology of these younger men and younger women, and they are men and sisters, brothers and sisters who are doing this, so that they can begin to build that hedge at a young enough age, 10 plus, especially when they become 7, that's what, maybe 11, 12 years old?
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
10, 11, 12 years old.
Because, unfortunately, we're now looking at, since we talk about, and Jimmy talked about this a lot, when we look at what you and what we saw in the early 80s, the war on drugs, which was the war on the Black family, from our perspective, it began to destabilize the Black family, on top of Jimmy and I talking about government programs, welfare, that began to pull more fathers and Black men out of Black households. Then you add the so-called war on drugs, which began to house our Black men in prisons and jails across the country. So we're looking at now, it's 2023. We're talking about over 2 generations of the mass housing of a significant number of Black men. The Sentencing Project that was doing this, 1 in 81 Black adults in the U.S. are serving in state prison. 1 out of 81. In Wisconsin, 1 in 36. That's absolutely insane. In 12 states, more than 50% of the prison population is Black, and those are in states where in Michigan, population as small as 14% and as large as, I think, Mississippi, 37%. But again, 14%, 20%, 30%, over 50% in our prisons, state prisons across the country. And so I'm kind of turning the corner. You've talked about the impact that the mass incarceration of Black men and Black women have had on our communities. That means no fathers and no mothers, no caretakers for our children. Talk about that. You can kind of talk to this from a personal level, not just the statistics, but the psychology and the impact that now 2 generations plus in this is having. And then let's talk about what you're doing in that area as well.
Right. I want to begin by saying, because I see in the chat, someone was citing that 1994 crime bill, right? And whenever I see that, I like to think that the work that we're doing for those men and women who were impacted by that, who did, harsh prison time, 10, some was up to 20 years in prison. We are providing a avenue and a platform for those men who are coming out to be utilized, right? We're giving them, because when we look at the state of our communities and what they in, we giving those same individuals who have been written off coming out of prison an opportunity to get right back in the flow of things. Take a look at it from this perspective. So we deal with the school system, right? And we all know the data and the facts around our school system, especially in the urban communities, right? You have little Ray who come to school and all he do is sleep, right? And then and because he stays sleep, you have a teacher who don't understand what's going on with him. They don't have the time to know what's going on with him. Give little Ray a referral, right? Write little Ray up 2 or 3 times to suspend him out of school. But just imagine if you had, and what we do now, you had brothers and sisters who can become the intermediary between that school and that community or that family, who can then go to little Ray house and see that, okay, little Ray didn't eat, his mother ain't in the household, his father ain't there, et cetera, et cetera. And not only that, I'm gonna become the mentor for him. Think about what that does to the school in terms of their attendance, bringing kids in, because we know schools get paid by kids in seats, right? And so if we have individuals in our community who are skilled and not scared to go to Fraser Courts or East Dallas, that because that's the neighborhood they come out of, and they can go over there and holler at Shaniqua and say, look, we got to get Ray, we got to create this system. Just imagine what that does for the school, and it gives a passion and some purpose to that man or that woman coming out of prison who may not necessarily qualify for some other type of job, but it helps our community, right? And so it's many ways that we can address the stuff that's happening in our neighborhood. I can complain about what's not happening, or I can say, man, let me with the information that I know, let me begin to attack it from a perspective that I can make a difference. I know that when you put positive men with lived experiences, or just positive black men into the lives of black kids, they don't have to be their fathers. They don't have to be. All they have to do is be in their lives and show them that they love them and that they care. I know what can happen because I was that kid. I said earlier, I was a talented and gifted student. I made straight A's, right? But I ended up starting the game because my neighborhood said smart kids get jumped, get beat up. And so kids like me have to amputate my personality and pretend that I'm that which the neighborhood say I gotta be. But imagine if you didn't have to do that. Imagine if in these schools where we seeing all this violence, you got black men who got lived experience walking the hallway with walking talking. It's hard to have bullies. It's hard to have kids who skip school. It's hard to have all that because they know the neighborhood and they know those kids emphatically. You know what I'm saying? So it's many ways to address this problem. And yes, I do think that a lot of that trauma in our kids' ACE scores has a lot to do with the acting out and the stuff that we see them doing. We have to, as black men, we have to be advocates for that, the therapy that they need, the love that they need. But it's a myriad of ways that we attack this problem. We just have to become active in the situation.
Let's talk a little bit more about the programs that you guys have been focused in and working with brothers and sisters who have been incarcerated, getting them back via reentry programs and or other strategies to make a positive impact in our communities. And then at an even broader level, we know what the numbers are like in the disparity of the sentencing of African Americans versus Latin Americans, Asian Americans, etc. Talk about that as well.
Man, I'm a product of that. You know, like I'm the product of what my brother was saying earlier in terms of pleading out because of this system. You know, I'm a product of that. You know, that's why I speak so passionate about it, because I was a young 19-year-old with a drug case where 4 officers planted drugs on me and had an attorney, a white attorney, who told me that this case, that I would beat this case because the guy who drugs with it wrote an affidavit. But when it came down for me to go to trial, pick my jury trial, I had a friend who was going to trial in the courtroom next to me, who I knew he was facing the same thing I was because the officer lied on him. You know, that's what they did back in those days. They put drugs on you and they lied on you. Right?
Still do.
They still do that, right? And that was really opened my eyes to activism, because I was so naive. I didn't believe that an officer who was sworn to protect and all that would put their hand on the Bible and lie. So that opened my eyes because I didn't believe that could happen. I thought that was in the movies. And so when I got ready to go to trial, my lawyer, who had told me that I had no problem, my friend had just got found guilty for something he didn't do, and they gave him 20 years. And I said, oh, it made me ask my attorney, hey, what's going on? How we looking? My white attorney said this to me. He said, Antong, change his whole tune up. He said, Antong, a white attorney, y'all, he said, more than likely you're going to have an all-white jury. And they're not going to be able to identify with you. You're going to have a white prosecutor who won't want to fry you and a white judge who's not going to believe your side. He says 50-50. And you know what I did? I was like one of the hundreds of thousands of black men that were faced with that criminal legal system. I said, go in there and plead me, give me probations. That's what I said for a charge that I didn't commit. And I ended up in prison for that. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm a byproduct of that system. I understand the system very well. Is one of the reasons and inclinations for me to change once I got to prison. I said I wanted to get out and do something to change so young people don't have to face what I faced, because it was eye-opening for me. I was naive. I thought we had a real criminal justice system until I got up close and I seen how it operates and how it indiscriminately destroy black men. And it's a system that does that, black men and black women. I said that I wanted to help. You know, I want to be an advocate, but I will say this before I pause. It really spurred me to understand that we have to begin to educate our people, and I'm a part of many efforts that do in terms of jury duty and being on grand juries, because I believe, and I've been saying this for a couple of years now, that injustice happen on the front end. It don't happen on the back end. It happened on the front end when we have a brush with the criminal legal system. That's where it happens, in the courtroom, because of you. If you're affluent and you got money, you could be guilty and get off. But if you're poor and innocent and don't have no money, you go into prison. And so I'm a part of a number of organizations and coalitions that address this kind of stuff. But we got to educate our people on showing up, because Mr. Duncan and we keep it 100. You know, our people get those jury summons and throw them in trash because they don't want to go.
Find every way to get out of it.
They'll find a way to get out of it, and that's how black men get railroaded by this system, because it's not a jury day period. It's some people like that lawyer told me in 1996. They not gonna be able to identify with you. They don't understand.
The whole system believes they're doing a greater good to society.
Exactly.
You may not be guilty of this, but I know you're guilty of 10 other things we haven't caught you for. So any way we can get you off the street and get you incarcerated is doing a good for society. So yeah, the system is not fair.
It's not at all.
There are a lot of our young men who are stuck in prisons, pleaded guilty. And I always hear this, like, well, okay, why would he plead guilty then if he wasn't guilty? Man, you just don't understand when you're facing 30 or 40, your life versus something that you didn't do, and you know the system and don't believe the system is going to give you a fair chance. That is a lot of pressure to roll the dice and hope that the system is going to come out with a fair outcome with your life.
Right. You're absolutely correct. I just seen that happen over and over again. And that's why I advocate for people. That's why I spend a lot of my time educating those people who are inside that system. I spend a lot of my time, and I spend a lot of my time educating white folks. I spend a lot of my time educating white folks on this system, because a lot of them don't believe that a lot of them are naive to believe that these type of systems, this type of injustice.
Well, the system seems fair to them. I mean, so why would they believe?
Right.
You know, all they know, the few times they've dealt with the system, it seemed fair to them. They may have to make a call to their friend or a judge or a buddy or somebody who knows somebody and got something taken care of. So it seems like everything is good to them. So until you're on the other end of the other opposite side of that, you don't understand how unfair and heavy-handed the system can be until the weight of the government is coming down on you, and you don't have the resources, the money, you don't have the you don't know the right people to fight against that.
Right.
So let me do this, as we have about 5 minutes left. So what do we do to begin to affect change. We're talking to our folks in our community. Obviously, serve on jury. Do not throw away that paper. Number two, understand the law. You don't have to be an attorney to understand your rights and to understand your law. It would help if you have enough money to hire a good attorney, but everybody don't have that kind of money.
Right.
What other things institutionally, structurally, or as a community must we begin to commit to so that we can change this trajectory of how our young men and young women are mistreated, not just in terms of the enforcement of the law, but also when it comes to the jury, etc.
Mr. Lucky, can I jump in real quick and give you the last word?
Yes.
My little 2 cent opinion would be stay out of the system. Don't think that going to jail is a rite of passage to man.
We got to change that. We got to change that.
Stay out of the system as best you can, please. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Lucky.
But it also, sometimes, Jimmy, it targets you.
I know it does. We have to do our absolute best to keep our young men safe and out of that system.
Yeah, I was gonna echo what Jimmy just said, and that's the work that we do. We really, I think, the problem with our communities and why they end up in those systems is LOL, which means there is a lack of love. That's for us. Core is a lot. You got a young person who's growing up who don't receive nurturing and care. They don't receive somebody who says, I love you, I believe in you, and they don't. We have to be real with that. That's not happening because the family is destroyed. Mother is working long hours. Father is either disgruntled or in prison. So this young person is growing up very resentful because nobody is saying what's going on with you. The school don't have time to say what's going on with you. And so by the time this young person gets 14 to 15 years old, they carrying a stick with a switch on it, and they don't have no regards or no empathy for life. And they normally mow down people who look just like them, right? And so for us, right, we say LOL is the problem. It's a lack of love in our communities because of whatever reason, right? And we believe that the solution to LOL is also LOL, meaning a lot of love. We got to give a lot of love to our young people.
I like that.
So when we begin to, I tell people all the time, man, that little brother who got those tattoos on his face, pants probably sagged, you may think that he don't want love, but I'm telling you, that young person is dying and maybe even crying out for some love. And all it takes is a brother who is interested enough to say, I ain't gonna talk to you about what you need to do. I'm gonna model it for you. I'm gonna walk aside you. I'm gonna help you make the right. I'm gonna give you options to make the right choice, and you're gonna see me. I'm telling you, I've seen this. I'm gonna be quiet. I had a young person call me who was in my program over 15 years ago, and I hadn't seen him, a little Hispanic kid. And he called me and he said, I don't know how he found me because he reached out on Facebook 15 years later. And he said to me, Mr. Lucky, I have a problem. He said, I'm in the Army now and I'm married and I got a 3-year-old daughter. And I said, if anybody can help me with this, it will be Mr. Lucky. And he found me. My name is not Antong Lucky on Facebook. He found me, right? And he said, man, I'm in the Army. I said, AJ, you in the Army? That's great. I would have never expected that. He said, Mr. Lucky, you the one who told me to go to the Army. I said, oh, yeah, I did tell you to go to the Army. Because I remember, it brought it back to me. I remember this kid was in a bunch of gang stuff. And I said, man, you need to get away out your neighborhood, get some education, and the Army will take you, or the Navy, some will take you where you can get education, blah, blah, blah. I did tell him that, right? But he had a dilemma, and it was an easy dilemma for me to solve. But he remembered me. The point is, he remembered me 15 years later, what I said to him in passing, dropping him off, because he was in my program on the school bus. He took to heart a little kid that you probably would have said, nah, he would never go to the Army, never be a sergeant, never be married. But this is a young man who was a grown man now, who is remembering things that I told him when he was 15 and 16 years old. Wow. And look and find me is indicative and evidence that if we begin to love on these young people, we can change it. Because it's just like what Mr. Stewart said, if we begin to love on them and start modeling, then they don't end up in the system. That rites of passage of going to prison, we saying, nah, that ain't how you do it, bro. You got to have life going this way. Let me introduce you to Mr. Duncan. Here go a professional who's doing this. And then that relationship happened. All our young kids need is an intentional care and show of love from men in communities that really love them, that really understand that if you go this way, this is what's gonna happen. And men who can say, I never went that way and I'm successful. That's all they need. And that can change them from ending up in systems.
Very powerful message.
You have said a powerful word today, brother. There are a lot more things that I'd like to share, but we are not going to have you come back.
We have to have you come back. You have to come back. Yeah.
I gotta come back. That went too fast, man.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna have to come back. So maybe hopefully within the next month or so, we can have you to come back. We're going to continue this dialogue because there are some things you begin to unpack, and some of that onion you were beginning to peel off, man. And we are out of time. So, brother, I appreciate you. We love you. We appreciate what you're doing, man.
You're an American hero.
What is it we can do? Briefly, because I know, Jimmy, we got to shut it down. What is it that we can do to help support what you're doing, whether that's financial, whether that's boots on ground, or whatever it is, to continue to support what you're doing, and then we'll close out the show.
Man, I want you to just come see what I see, and then you'll get in. I told my team this past Saturday we had 47 new people come in.
Wow.
Real OGs from neighborhoods, and I told my team, I said, our job is to just lead people to the water. They'll get clean and jump in when they're ready. Just lead them. Don't have no descriptors in terms of who qualified and who not. Just bring them together and watch the magic happen. They'll get in the water when they're ready. And so I say this to you guys. I appreciate you guys giving me this platform, but it ain't about money. It's just about presence and being available. This platform is helping me because it's amplifying the message that we've been saying for 23 years. And so I'm appreciative of that. Anything else, man, that's just love. It's all love.
All right.
Let us know where your next event takes place so we can come check it out.
I will. I definitely do that. I appreciate y'all.
All right. We'll see you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Watch out for the J.